Hey there, historians. This is Velasquez, and here I am with our next installment of our World War I flipped lecture. And in this flipped lecture, we're going to go ahead and talk about an event in history in World War I, which is known as the Spark, right? The Spark, which is also known as the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now, as we talk about the start of World War I, in our last lecture, right, we talked about many causes, which is looking at military buildup, looking at national pride. Of course, we can't forget our discussion of the competition that occurred between European powers during the time period of imperialism. But today in the lecture, I'd like to talk a little bit more about alliances and about how one single event, again, proved catastrophic and lit the flames of war in Europe. Now, as we're beginning our discussion of World War I, it's important to keep in mind by the turn of the 20th century, nations of Europe had largely been at peace. There really hadn't been a war, right? If you think about it in our terms, if we talked about the French Revolution, American Revolution, different conflicts, right? Even in our last unit, we looked at the Opium War and imperialism that hadn't been in Europe's doorstep. So for the most part, Europe, for quite some time, our discussion had been on progress, right? With the Industrial Revolution, expansion, technology, improvements. And we see things start to shift when we start looking at, in the beginning of the 1900s, when we see the beginning of the formation of the alliances. Now, the two that we want to keep in mind before we introduce the assassination is the Triple Alliance. So keep in mind the Triple Alliance, which includes Germany, in this case, at the forefront, under the leadership of the ruler, which is Bismarck, had triumphed in previous wars like the Franco-Prussian War, and they had imposed some pretty embarrassing peace treaties on France. So we had seen some tension between Germany and France prior, but again, not to the scale of what we see a full-blown war. But we see that actually to deter the French from, kind of getting back at Germany, Bismarck and Germany pursued policies really trying to isolate France and kind of keep its own friends and allies for Germany. So Bismarck sought an alliance with Austria-Hungary, who was currently trying to launch an expansion into the Balkans. So the Balkans are sort of this area which is located right here on the map, which we'll take a closer look in that case. But that expansion in the Balkans also conflicted with Russian ambitions, right? Russia, which is right over there in the corner, also was interested into that region. So by late 1800s, Germany, about I think 1779, Germany and Austria-Hungary again developed the Central Powers, and they joined the Defensive Military Alliance. Basically, the military alliance, right? If one country pulls into conflict, the mindset is, hey, if you have my back, I have yours, right, to offer that protection. And to be honest, to offer that deterrence, right? In theory, if you know that it's not just picking a fight with one person, right? You have a whole group of people, maybe you be less likely to sort of get yourself in that conflict. The second one that we see formed is the Triple Entente. So the Triple Entente was France, Russia, and Britain. So France obviously was trying to regain kind of back its status, its European leadership. It had actually lost land, which up here in the top, which is territory known as Alsace-Lorraine from Germany. And France was looking for allies and friends, particularly Russia, to try to toughen up against Germany in that case. So, however, France could not overcome Bismarck's skillful diplomacy, which kept Russia friendly to Germany. But soon after Bismarck was actually dismissed as chancellor, Germany refused to renew its friendship with Russia. So then France kind of picked up on that and again provide military and industrial loans to Russia, gained its confidence, right, kind of bribed its way into a friendship, and then they formed a dual alliance. So let's flash back again. The last member of the Triple Entente is Great Britain. So Britain considered its industrial leadership and colonial empire threatened most by Germany. So we see over time in that case that Britain will sort of team up, and hence we have that Triple Alliance that's formed. So it's really important right here to study the map, because as we get into the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, you're going to later see how those alliances, we call them the tangled alliances, kind of start that chain reaction. All right, I want to zoom us in a little bit further to the area which is known on the map as the Balkan Peninsula. Now, the Balkan Peninsula, and historians will also refer to this as the powder keg, right? If you think about like a giant barrel of gunpowder, like in a cartoon or something like that, right? All you need is one match, one spark, one flame, and the whole thing goes kaboom. So the metaphor is correct in the sense that this area had been pretty hot with tension for quite some time. Now, if I pulled another map to show us the area that was once controlled by an empire known as the Ottoman Empire. And we're going to see the Ottomans, again, for various reasons, would have been losing control and power. And you can see the map right here. One of the things that is very tricky about this area is there's not a particular ethnic group. You can see that it's very, very rainbow on the map, right? So using the key, you can see you have Muslim groups, you have Croatians, you have Bulgarian, you have Serbs, you have Slavic, Macedonians. So it makes it very difficult, right, to basically put all these individuals with different cultures, different religions, different languages under the same umbrella. So when the Ottomans started sort of pushing back and receding, a lot of these particular areas were hoping that they would finally get their independence. They were looking to, develop national pride, create their own nation state. However, what we see happening is a larger empire to the north, which was the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Instead, they start taking over that territory, and they start claiming that into their own empire. So a lot of these larger nations, instead of allowing these sort of smaller ethnic groups to thrive and develop their own nations in this case, were very eager to capitalize on the fact that, hey, one empire's out, we're ready to sort of sink our teeth and get our hands on this territory as well. So in 1908, Austria actually annexed, or another word for take over, the areas on the map we can see, which is Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, these two Balkan areas were the ones with the largest Slavic population, and Serbian leaders they were once trying to actually rule these areas, these little territories on their own. They were pretty outraged, as you can imagine. They were hoping for their own independence. In the years that followed, tensions between Serbia and Austria pretty much increased, which you can imagine. The Serbs continually vowed to take Bosnia and Herzegovina away from Austria. And you can imagine, as in response, Austria-Hungary vowed to crush any Serbian effort to undermine its authority in the Balkans, right? According to Austria-Hungary, they had taken the territory, and again, any action to try to push them out, or again, trying to annex their own territory was an act of war, an act of revolution. All right, so we keep saying assassination. So the man on the screen, I hate to inform you, is our victim of the crime, so to speak. The man on the screen is referred to as the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was next in line to be the emperor of the Austrian and Hungarian Empire. Okay, so he has not officially the emperor, but again, someone that has a power and authority. Now, as time and tensions roll out, we see that Archduke Franz Ferdinand plans a visit to Serbia, and specifically, I should say, Sarajevo, which is in the Balkan Peninsula. Now, interesting enough, when word comes that he's interested in visiting there, right, to sort of show authority, show his dominance, showing that Austria-Hungary does declare and actually control that territory, he actually chooses a specific date. So when we look at the spark, the assassination takes place on June 28th. And in the history of the Serbians, it's actually an anniversary of a date in which, again, it was a battle against the Turks or the Ottomans. So sort of rubbing it in their face, right, a date that was important to them, taking back power, and really, many would say, again, kind of adding that extra flame, the fact that a lot of people in that particular area felt that he was an oppressor. And quickly we see that organizations begin sort of developing, right? Here's our chance. He's coming down to send a message, and we're going to send a message to him. All right, so if we introduce the victim of the assassination, we have to introduce the assassin. So the man on the screen you can see is Gavrilo Princip. Now, Gavrila Princip had been a member of an organization known as the Black Hand, which is basically a secret society committed to ridding Bosnia of Austrian rule. Now, he's only about 19 years old, okay, so he's a young man. He has a very passionate viewpoint, and he's very dedicated at any cost, we're going to see, to try to, again, fight for the freedom for his nation against Austria-Hungary. So what we see is, when the assassination is planned is that this organization, again, will be in the city the day that Austria Archduke will be visiting, and they're going to try to murder him before he's able to reach the center of the city. All right, so on the screen right now, here's a map to take a look at. So Archduke is coming June 14th, June 28th, I should say. And you can see Gavrilo and his team of conspirators are sort of lined up along the route. So if he's coming into town, again, he's sort of taking his car, taking his party, again, trying to go to town hall. So at first, again, Franz Ferdinand is going to pass through, and he passes by one of the co-conspirators with Gabrielic. So at first, the party, they actually try to throw a grenade. So the grenade hits the side of the car, but Franz Ferdinand was able to kind of throw himself back, and he wasn't able to get injured. So there were a few people that were injured, but the car continues to speed away. So finally, the car keeps cruising down, and it reaches to the town hall. Now, after the reception in the town hall, a lot of people said, hey, you just had, an attempt in your life. You narrowly escaped this assassination with this grenade. You got to get out of here. The city is sort of seething with rebellion. So the Archduke was persuaded to drive the shortest way out of the city and go quickly. Now, the tricky part of the map you're going to see is the road kind of maneuvers. It was shaped like the letter V. So kind of making the sharp turn at the bridge over at the river bend. So Franz Ferdinand's car, right, which to make that sharp turn is kind of forced to slow down and make the turn. So it was here when the car slowed down to make that turn, Gavrilo had the opportunity to take his shot.
Archduke's car rolled in, turned right, and stopped right here, as the driver was told they actually wanted to go that way. The driver stalled the car. Princip took his pistol out of his pocket and fired 2 shots at 1.5 meter range. The first hit Sophie in the abdomen. The second shot grazed the jugular of the Archduke. They were mortally wounded. They were the first 2 shots fired in what would become the First World War, a war that would see well over 10 million people killed, fired on this street corner in Sarajevo.
All right, so this is where it gets tricky, right? So that story I just told you, anybody would agree is a very tragic story, right? The fact that this man and his wife were gunned down in the middle of the street. We could say it's tragedy, the fact that these nationalists felt they had no other choice but, again, to commit this assassination. But where it really gets tricky is when you look at the map, right, you have to go back to those alliances. So you can only imagine, right, Austria-Hungary is looking for revenge against the fact that they believe Serbia, again, had basically gunned down in cold blood murder the future heir to their throne. Now, going back to the alliances, we know that Germany has pledged complete support to Austria-Hungary in that case. So we see that Serbia has sort of a connection to Russia, because if we go back to the ethnic map, we see a lot of people in Russia, again, have also Slavic national ethnic group. And so we see, because of that piece, Russia is sympathetic to Serbia. And we see that Russia is going to actually start building up some troops to kind of, support and come to the defense of Serbia, because we know that France was in alliance with Russia, right? Germany armies moved towards France, and again also had alliances with France and Russia. So ultimately, we're going to see Britain is to declare war on Germany. So one by one, right, the dominoes fall in this case. So we have this dicey situation where it could have been just a conflict between Serbia and Austria-Hungary, that kind of blows up into this situation because everybody sort of jumps in to support their alliance and sort of pledge their military in this case. So This really sets the stage of when we see official declaration and the start of World War I.